Yeah, I mean, like, the philosophical and mindset approach is also very important. Like, you have to train those mindset-related tasks. Stay true to the codex of the Bushido or whatever.
The Codex of the Bushido.
You're listening to the Art and War podcast with your hosts, Mitch and Nathan. Mitch is a former airborne infantry squad leader who now spends most of his time coaching soccer. Nathan is a professional illustrator and an avid shooter with a couple of years of Canadian military experience. Together, they run the Seaburn art page. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, this isn't going to be the opening. It's fucking messy.
Hey, let's do an opening.
Yeah.
You're a professional podcaster.
I'm a professional podcaster, and I don't fucking know how, because I expected like 10 people to listen to this, and now there's a bunch, and I'm just some idiot. But yeah, hey guys, welcome back to the Art and War podcast. I'm actually going to do a somewhat professional opening today. Today we have Felix and Matt of XRAY Alpha and RedBeard Tactical. We're here to talk about vector-based dynamics and kinetic solutions in operational environments.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That vector-based stuff, that's the next level. That's the new shit right there.
I think you can't deny the future of vector-based CQB. It's like so let's talk about vector-based CQB first, because I think a lot of people can't follow us when it comes to vector-based CQB. And how did that stuff start? I think when Matt and we had beers after SHOT Show, and we had a lot of fun, and we talked about a lot of stuff going on, and people basically like putting words into words to explain things that are either common or completely made up. So the idea was to create a training company with the name Made Up Solutions. And
Yeah,
that's the Instagram profile we're using.
the funny thing about Made Up Solutions is, well, the company name, but then people will still think that vector-based CQB is a legitimate system.
It's a legitimate system.
It's a legitimate system. What are you talking about, Matt? I remember. Yeah.
Like bullets fly in vectors. Like that's clear. Like they're drawing clear lines, and if you are into cover, you're projecting those geometric anti-vectors. So it's logical. If it's not vector-based. But
I remember when I tried to sign up for my first Made Up Solutions class, and you looked at my high school calculus marks and you told me no. It's for smart people only. Only big brains can do vector-based CQB.
I think if we see like the parallels in the industry, we see basically the same system. We see guys putting something like, okay, bullets fly straight in some kind of way, and then they are turning it into, it's not actual science, it's like bro science. Like I'm no scientist or something, but I can say like, okay, bullets fly in a vector-like path. And people are thinking like, yeah, you just invented like gunfighting.
It's going to change the industry.
It's going to change the industry, yeah.
And I'll tell you what, that's a very common though, like theme in the industry, in the training industry, is that people are like so concerned about being different or having a gimmick that being right and being sound in the information is just that's not even second, third, or fourth in their interest. Like, or in their priorities. It's way down the totem. It's like, no, I gotta have a shtick. This is my thing. And then it's funny, you could say like, hey, vector-based CQB came from tier 1 level missions over X amount of years and has been tried, tested, and true. And the thing with the internet, right, just like all these other companies, that they kind of like, I always call it like sucking you into the bluff. I'm going to give you just enough information, and you're going to fill in the blanks on what you think I did.
Yeah.
Kind
People are not like telling, they are suggesting. They are suggesting about their background a lot. That's a thing, and they also build up like a construction of, let's say, law or whatever, or science about what they are telling people to set it apart for like commercial environment.
Yeah, and it's such, like, I think it borderlines, like, it's just a fraud. And you see plenty of guys, plenty of companies out there that are propped up on this.
Yeah.
Like, where it's, and guys that come from or can kind of pick through it or see what they're saying, it's like, that's just, it's you're outright kind of lying.
Yeah.
About it, about experience. And that's where I think for a lot of people within the training industry, they're looking for experience-based training.
Yeah.
But what they get is they get training that's propped up with kind of like nonsense or hey, you lied about the experience and there's nobody has any interest in vetting anyone, or there's absolute kind of no way to vet that anyway, if you could. And then they just take them, hey, yep, that's what he said. And then by the time you realize you've gotten duped, it's usually too late.
I mean, if we are looking like at you and your background, I think the best part is that you don't really touch it like a lot, but you prove yourself like a shooter in USPSA, and you're saying like, this is the way to do stuff, prove stuff and do stuff instead of focusing on what you have been.
I always looked at, for XRAY Alpha, it was a company that was going to be built on like demonstrable performance.
Yeah.
Like on demand. What can I do? And it was never I was never interested in like, hey, we're going to talk about some shit that happened in the past. That doesn't matter. No one cares about that. You care about what can you deliver now? And then trying to get guys to look at all their training that they're doing with just a very, critical type approach to it. Like pick it apart.
Yeah.
Pick what you're doing. Anytime somebody tells me something, be skeptical about it.
Yeah.
Prove it for yourself, And I think a lot of that just gets lost, where training in a lot of different spaces has turned into like an entertainment type activity rather than a real training event. And for me,
it absolutely does. Yeah.
And the people that I'm interested in training is like, we have to realize, like, we're not teaching people fucking CrossFit.
Yeah.
Like, you're teaching them skills that, if it's a citizen that's interested in self-defense, or if it's a law enforcement guy or a military guy, you're teaching them things that they are going to rely on, or they may have to rely on to save their lives and save their team's lives.
Yeah. What I really liked about your approach is like your definition of hard skills. That's a great thing, because you're like differentiating skills that can be proven, like in lab conditions, like for example shooting is a hard skill. Physical fitness, especially when you go specific, is a hard skill. Like that's something you can demonstrate. That's something you can do. So there are a lot of hard skills, but there are also like a lot of soft skills that are, or more like soft skills, like for example tactics. I don't think you can like demonstrate tactics in a lab environment because they are living out of context.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I think you can only demonstrate tactics, in the application in reality. And then you try, that's where I think like the critical thinking skills approach to it is like, you try to come up with the best thing. Let's make it to me, the best tactic in the world is something that is simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The more complicated you make it, the more it just kind of gets, the water gets muddy. But you can only prove like tactical prowess or anything after the fact.
Yes. You have to prove it. Of course, not everyone, like they're, be it in the military or whatever, there's so many like peacetime armies or whatever, and they are coming up with new stuff. They're developing their TTPs accordingly. But even they are looking back at the past, at what has been done. And like, it's not that simple. Tactics is not a product you can buy in a class or something. Like there's like so much to tactics. And I think like that's a very great correlation point between like our two pages, because you're focusing on the whole shooting hard skill part, and we are one of the pages actually talking about tactics. Like there's so many people that can't like define tactics, that don't know what doctrine is, that don't know a lot, and they are all talking tactics, and they're thinking like, okay, when you're in a CQB situation, putting your left foot in a 45-degree angle, that's tactics. That's what they're thinking.
That's where I think it's like it all gets muddied in the water. I think if you're doing CQB training and at any point you're concerned with foot placement and things like that, you're missing the intent of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said it's simplicity is an absolute important thing for doctrine. So we are building like all successful armies I know about have built their doctrine and their TTPs around simplicity. You're not overcomplicating it. Simple tactics are easy to adapt by someone who can make decisions. And then you get guys that are like putting out super complex procedures. So I don't even know what they have in mind when they want to talk actual tactics. Because at this point, like, especially if you're not training the same thing over and over again, what should, for example, a civilian get out of such a complicated class? Like he couldn't get out anything out of it.
I feel like a lot of people, they overestimate the military experience thing by quite a bit, especially when it comes to things like training. So whenever I talk to anyone here, and, you know, adequate shooter, you know, there's not exactly a lot of training availability up, you know, in the Great White North, especially where I am. But, you know, I'll go with new people, and they'll look at, you know, my very lame amount of military experience and think I'm John Wick. And I feel like that's kind of a snake oil that a lot of people can use, even though, you know, I guess my MOS equivalent would be like 11B, but it's nothing. It's nothing. And what goes along with what you were saying is people forget who's the average person that joins the military. 18-year-old grunt, you know, right out of high school. What should, you know, tactics and SOPs and general doctrine be built around? Something that's repeatable, something that can be learned easily, and something that can be done by anyone. You know, you put something in someone's hand, and logistically, it makes sense for something to be repeatable.
But let me tell you something. Like this 18-year-old grunt, and I've seen like 18-year-old grunts. I was 18 years at my first deployment. Even that 18-year-old grunt can like do more tactics training, actual tactics training with his own decision making included, than a responsible citizen who's joining, like, let's call it a pop tactics CQB class.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
The civilian is only like listening to the instructor. He don't has like the capacity to rehearse what he has done. He's basically following setup procedures. And those setup procedures are usually set up in a way that proves the instructor right. That's the only way to do it. But if you're in a field training exercise for like 4 days or something, and you're trying to, let's say, okay, we are focusing on assaulting a position. Like they are seeing like many different approaches, and that's how tactics are made. Like it's about decision making, and it's hard to recreate the same environment in a commercial class.
This is true. I absolutely agree with that. But in the military, they don't force you to read The Art of War and, you know, bow and wear a. I wanted to say kimono.
I mean, Matt, did you read Sun Tzu?
I read Sun Tzu years ago.
Yeah,
I think it. Yeah. You know, when I joined the military, it wasn't a wartime military. You know, I joined in 1994, and so we trained almost exclusively off of doctrine, you know, and learning, you know, battle drills and different, you know, squad size tactics, team tactics, and all that. And then you had few and far between experiences where you would come across people that had actually experienced, you know, combat, where it was legacy stuff from Vietnam or some, you know, very few guys, Gulf War, and some Somali guys or things like that. And then you just had their input, and what they would tell you was like, hey, this was what doctrinally is supported in reality, and these are kind of the things that will change. But now, coming out, you fast forward through post September 11th, there's now a vast, you know, huge swath of like combat experience out there. And then a lot of these guys, there was a huge influx into the training space, right? In 2004, 2005. And there were guys that figured, hey, I've got this figured out. Maybe I went to Afghanistan once, or I did the invasion of Iraq. They got out, they were with Blackwater, and now they're training companies. But you fast forward to 2023, and it's like, you motherfuckers don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Like this, you've seen the evolution of it, like from what we were doing in 2003 compared to how it shifted in 05, 06 based off threats, how it shifted in 9 and 10, right? Then shifting theaters, 12, 13, 14, all the way into like 17, 18, 19. And the one thing you learn about like doctrinal approaches is they have to be flexible, right? You default to principles, like you have to train principally based. And if you're not doing that, you're already behind, because like, just like, you know, where you can't prove under lab conditions any sort of tactics thing, because there's variables that are the people that you're fighting.
Yeah, if you're training tactics, like if you're really doing like tactics training, let's say it's about decision making, you can do it on a flat range, because in my opinion it would like ruin the whole contextual thing going around it. So you have like, tactics always need context. Like I've read something like a few months ago, like tactics can't exist without strategy, and there's truth to it, because as you said, you're fighting amongst the people, or you're fighting in a conventional war, like right now in Ukraine. That's a big difference on what you are doing, and stuff changes at the same at the same time. A lot of stuff stays the same or goes back to what we learned like in the world wars.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the things, right? Like, for example, you look, Battle Drill 1 Alpha has not changed since 1944.
Yeah.
Right? The principles there, like squad attack on a fixed position, has not changed.
Yeah. The principles, I personally, we have talked about that. Like, I don't like battle drills in general, because I think they are like discouraging leaders to think on their own, subordinate leaders. But yeah, the principles are staying the same, and they're good.
Well, I think so. I actually do like battle drills for the thing. It's a good start point.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with battle drills comes in on when you're doing training, who is assessing a squad's or a platoon's performance? Are you assessing it against what it reads in the book? Or are you able to look, are you experienced enough and able to look at the training environment that was set up? And did they accomplish all the principles based off of the environment that they were in? Absolutely. And that's how I think you have to look at it. But in terms of like a start point for training, I don't think you can, if you start with a very flexible decision-making process, like at the very basic level, you get a kind of a really loose product at the end. Yeah. But if you start with a very rigid thought process, right, you can always loosen up, but it's very hard to start loose and then tighten everybody up.
You start like, you can start, in my opinion, with like a textbook example, which can be a battle drill. We have in the German military, there are always like textbook examples, but they are not like battle drills. Like, it's always stated like that's not how it has to be done. It's just an example. And you can start with that example, making stuff like more complicated in some regards. So you're changing the terrain, you're changing like communication, stuff like that. And people start to adapt and think on their own. And like, I think doing the right thing is more important than following the battle drill to the detail.
I agree 100%. You know, there's the decision-making element. The problem is when you're assessing decision-making element, it really plays into who's evaluating it and their thought process. Because there's a lot of right ways to do things. And then there could be like my way.
Yeah. And then you have like that's a thing we could talk about. Like, I see in a lot of commercial training offers, I see like there's a lack of the enemy applying tactics or techniques. The enemy is not maneuvering in an aggressive fashion. And that's something you see a lot. Like, you see those CQB classes, and if I would like defend a house, even with a fire team or whatever, I would use the first opportunity to conduct like a counterattack or something, to get back to the initiative again. And you don't really see that often. You see guys standing around in a room like props, following like a script, and that's like it.
Yeah, I mean, you can, you know, I've seen it in reality. You can prevent entire teams of guys from entering rooms with not very high volumes of fire.
Yeah.
You know, you send one bullet outside through a door at kind of 1 to 3 second intervals. No one's going in that door.
Yeah.
You know, you're trying to get other ways to look at it. And that's one of the things I think now the CQB world is so
CQB world
littered with just kind of nonsense. Well, the training world, right? Because it's all propped up where everybody has the codec on experience and they all do that. And as soon as you ask them to like, hey, let's talk about your experience, it clams up. Everybody's too busy. Everybody's too whatever. It's like, and I think that's very telling for a lot of these people that are like not willing to defend some of the things they're doing, you know. And then there's also a good core group of guys that I know that just have no interest in even pressing that topic with people. Like, they look at these other companies as like, it's just a fucking joke.
Yeah, I think the same. Like, it's like really hard to talk to guys that are suggesting they have a certain kind of experience, but when you ask them for facts, be it like, that tells us nothing, but let's start with like deployment pictures, whatever. Like, that's worth nothing on its own. But if someone is suggesting he was something somewhere, he can't even come up with a picture. He can't even like in a conversation come up where he was exactly. Like, that's the thing. Like, when we talked at SHOT Show, we had been like accidentally like seeing that we had been in the same AO in the same time frame, and it's like pretty rare to get people, or to find people that are like laying down facts. That's a big issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I find is like real people have no problem laying down facts.
Yeah.
But when your story is not necessarily true, it's very hard to lay down facts. Like, I could probably spout out some medical stuff and tell you that I'm a physician and make you believe it. But now when you start asking me specifics about what certain the medical school I tell you I went to looks like, well, you know, I didn't go into that building.
I mean, you can use so many smart words like what we did with made up solutions. I'm not a fucking scientist or something, but I think what we did, it was pretty scientific. And if someone is reading that, like, he could say like, yeah, that makes sense, because what I also think is that people are looking for the coziness of science and the coziness of tactics to hide their hard skills. And in a firefight, what most people are talking about, like the smallest element of everything in combat, is the firefight. which can be between you and me or between two squads or whatever. But in the firefights, there's not a lot of place for tactics, in my opinion. There isn't like that much of a decision-making process. And when you see instructors coming up like with, you have to break your opponent's OODA loop because they've read OODA loop somewhere. No, I don't even think about my opponent's OODA loop at this level. I think at maybe company or battalion level.
This week's episode is brought to you by returning sponsor of the Art and War podcast, FieldSeats.com. FieldSeats.com is an e-commerce federally licensed firearms dealer. They provide virtual reviews on brand new firearms, optics, and gear, where at the end of the review, you are automatically entered with purchase of a review to win the item being reviewed.
Currently, they've got reviews up from $20 for a brand new Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 2.0 to $60 for a brand new Trigicon ACOG with an RMR on it. Each review has limited seating, so your chances of winning the giveaway are that much higher. I have to lean into it. I have to. It's a pun.
God. Check out fieldseats.com to purchase your review and enter to win the item being reviewed. And use code CBRN, that's Charlie Bravo Romeo November, to get 10% off your order.
Be sure to also check out their Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at @field_seats for updates on the products and other tips and info like how to pack a ruck or how to gas your rifle.
Once again, use code CBRN to receive 10% off your entire purchase at fieldseats.com. Terms and conditions apply. How's it going, lads and ladies? BR and Nathan here to take a quick break to tell you about our Patreon. Not only do we want to continue improving the quality of what we can do here on Art and War, but we want to push what we do all over at Seaburn Art, from the guides to pursuing video content and keeping us warm during another winter of illness and death, and the Patreon helps us get after it.
But what's in it for you? Our Patreon subscribers enjoy 5 different tiers of exclusive perks, ranging from all the content we'd post on a pre-Zuckerberg Instagram, downloadable high-resolution guides, targets such as Redcoat Skinwalkers, John Harvey Kellogg, seasonal targets, and more. Behind-the-scenes info like my personal art, introducing all new exclusive mini-podcast episodes, and at our highest tier, get monthly art commissions created by yours truly.
You can find our Patreon via the link in this episode's description, at patreon.com/SeaburnArt, or in the Seaburn Art page's bio on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
The funniest thing to me are the people that really dig into the OODA loop. Like, that was something for pilots, right? Yeah. It was, you know, observe, orient, decide, and act was the fast-paced world of dogfighting and flying planes. And now you somehow take this, you know, and I think that there's a lot of like historical guys like the gun sight dudes and all of that like they were doing the same thing that you see now in terms of they're trying to drive innovation. They were doing the right thing, but there was no experience there, right? There was maybe some participation in some activities, you know, but they called combat or whatever, but it wasn't, you didn't have the experience, but you're driving and it laid a foundation, but it creates like a cult-like following. Like the OODA loop thing, I will say, like from my experience, you know, I was really early on taught about OODA loop and was taught about like different colors of like
awareness, readiness, states of readiness,
awareness that you go into. And I will say, I have never experienced any of that.
You're not for one. You're not at Jello right now?
No,
You're not at Jello.
I will be at White when I'm on target. I just am not a very excitable person in that way. But but people like that. They want to have like systems. It's almost like you want to have an explanation for what you're feeling, where rather than like I will say, like, of all the, I sleep the best when I was on a combat deployment, you know, that was a very relaxing time for me. It wasn't a stressful time at all.
There's so much stuff getting like literally made up, like with the stress topics, OODA loop, whatever. I mean, like if you're listening to guys, I don't just want to pull my own experience, but look at like very historic accounts, like of the World War or whatever, from guys that had been in a firefight. They can describe this firefight in a very detailed fashion. And if you're looking at people that had been like in dangerous situations, they all say like the same. It happened like in time lapse. It didn't like happen super fast. And then you have guys that say like, because of the combat stress of something, you can't use the slide release because you're losing so many motorics.
So yeah, once again, we all know who came up with the gross motor skills thing. Zero
Who
combat
was it?
experience. It was Haley. It was the Magpul guys.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The gross motor skills. Zero combat experience. And I'll talk about that with anyone, right? I've seen the unedited version of the video from Najaf, like the Blackwater times. Like, dude, just, it's like, stop with that. It's not a thing, right? If gross motor skills were a thing, you wouldn't be able to pull the trigger.
Exactly.
You're telling me my thumb can't hit the slide release, but I can still touch the trigger? It's like, your argument doesn't even make sense.
It's not science, it's bro science. Because if you're getting like you're making up the idea of gross motor skills, but if you would ask someone who's actually into that about gross motor skills, he would say like, you're wrong, that's not a gross motor skill. Yeah, you're still using fine motorics. Like pulling a trigger is a fine motoric skill.
I don't know, anything from Adam, but isn't that literally the point of training?
Yeah. It's like, if you were to look at like fighters and how they train, right? You're inoculating yourself to a situation that would really be overcoming for most people.
Yeah.
Right. You think of it in terms of where, like when I grew up, it was still okay for kids to fight. And I still remember like in 5th grade, my very first fist fight, like meet me out behind the music room and we're going to do this, and how nervous I was and all of that. And then when it was over, you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
Right. And then the more kind of in that era, the more like altercations, the more fist fights you got into, the better you got at it because you were inoculating yourself to that level of, or to that experience. And I think training for this needs to be the same way. Right. But it was always in the past, it was like, well, we're going to use like some physical thing, a physical stressor to simulate combat. And I did that for years and years and years, but as soon as we all went to combat, you come back and you're like, that's not what we need to do. I just need, the stressor needs to be now, I've got to do this faster.
Yeah.
And we learned that very early on in the 2000s. It's not how many push-ups I can do or running from here to there. Like there's an element of stress there, but like that doesn't simulate the stress that you need. What you need to do is like get really comfortable performing the hard skill at a very, very high level. And that way on game day, your controlled pace is faster than you need to be.
There's actually a pretty interesting historic example for that. I think it was like in the 1950s. I did a story on that when the US Army tried to evaluate that new weapon system, with the split bullets and all that stuff. They wanted to simulate combat stress by putting up explosions, smoke grenades, and stuff like that. And like most of the grunts that had been on this exercise didn't even realize that there was like an explosion. They didn't care for it because they knew it was an exercise. So it wasn't a thing for them. They had been focused, and as you said, like the biggest stressor would have been to perform that faster. And when I remember like my basic training, what did stress me the most? A smoke grenade popping up beneath me? No. That was something cool. Like it didn't stress me. What did stress me was when I had like an instructor saying me to assemble that weapon faster. And that was something that really stressed me.
Yeah, because you have to perform a skill under a time metric, right? And if you look at it, like I was just having this conversation today, right? Everything, the only constant that really exists in terms of measurement is time.
Yeah.
Everything else can be subjective. So I can talk through a scenario, and I don't have to critique the actions or anything. I can tell you if it was good or bad if I just look at time wickets. Yeah, we breached at this time. We were target secure at this time. You were in room number 1 at this time, and room number 2 at this time. And as you see gaps, you can fill in the blanks there with what actually happened wrong.
Yeah. For measurement, it's absolutely true. And I totally agree. Like, if we are, no matter what we are talking, if we are talking tactics or land navigation or something, your measurement is time. If someone is capable of something, he will do it fast. Like, he will do it. But I think what a lot of people don't get is, like, there are certain kinds of skills. Like, there's the psychomotor factor to things, like, for example, shooting, running fast, whatever, catching a ball, stuff like that. That's a psychomotor skill, and you only learn it by repetitions. We can agree on that. Like, deliberate repetitions. Like, you don't have to senselessly repeat something, but you need deliberate repetitions. Sometimes you need a coach. And then we have, like, those whole cognitive skills that are, like, and I'm not making those terms up. This is actually a part of grown-up methodics. So you have, like, land nav, for example. Do I need a psychomotoric skill to adjust my compass? Do I need to do reps with that? No, I just need to understand it at some point and prove it in the field from time to time. And after a year, I need a refresher. So that's an entirely different skill. And that's something I see, like, in the community, with more civilians getting ready for other scenarios than just self-defense. So they are losing an interest in shooting. And I recently did that post and said, like, guys, your core focus on your daily training routine should be shooting. We are doing a lot of other stuff. Matt, for example, is doing a lot of shooting. Your daily training basis should be those psychomotor skills, shooting, physical fitness, because they are degrading super fast.
So one of the things I think people don't realize, right, is there are also elements of training that some people will never get despite reps. So you take land nav, for example, and this is why some places will use land nav as a stressor for a selection type event because of the kind of the effective intelligence, the working knowledge, the working intelligence that you have to have. People that can't conceptualize what they see in a 2D image of a map and then look out, you can't train that.
Nope.
Right? You can't. There's not enough time. You can take people out and be like, hey, this is a saddle. You see it over there. This is that. Look where you're at. And they still look at the map and they can't conceptualize contour lines to terrain that they're seeing in front of them. Right. Yeah. And that's where, like, all of this assessment stuff comes into place, where I think, there's different levels of assessment. If you're going into the infantry, right, to be either an 0311 or an 11 Bravo, there's a modicum of assessment that happens for that, right? There's a certain type of person that needs to do that. If you're going into
like, and I think it originates from your old MOS. There's, like, in certain units, there's, like, or in all units, basically, there's, like, this baseline of aptitude for something you need to have. And at some level for something, let's say CQB, you're really entering a room, you really need to be fast. You need a certain baseline level of aptitude to do that. And if you can't, like, catch a ball, if you have issues from your motoric skills, for example, catching a ball from the beginning on, CQB probably won't be the right thing for you.
No, and I think, too, though, if guys look at it in terms of training, right, and this goes more for, like, the civilian side, where guys are interested in it and maybe they've convinced themselves that they have a need for this skill for defense of themselves, defense of their family, or whatever, and they just don't see it. Usually, like, a company or an instructor is going to tell them, oh, no, you're doing really good, just keep training it or whatever. It's like, no, you need to look at your functional intelligence is very, very low. This is how you can do things to increase that part, right?
Yeah.
This is, maybe it's not reps on CQB. Maybe you need to do other things, right? And where I've found too, like, there's a huge correlation between guys that are able to train themselves and develop very, very high levels of hard skills are usually very trainable at more complicated tasks.
Yeah, I agree.
And like you see in the competitive shooting world, right? You see guys that, like, I've been shooting USPSA for 10 years and I'm a B class shooter. You should just quit. Like, that is, you are not either your level of commitment is lacking or whatever, but like at some point for 10 years, you've been coming every weekend and shooting and training on your own, and you're not able to conceptualize what needs to happen. Like, this is not your thing.
Yeah.
It's just not.
I totally agree. I don't think those guys have to necessarily quit, because trying, like, there's this level of aptitude you have. Like, I will never be like a quantum scientist unless I work for Made Up Solutions, but I will never be a quantum.
So look, I'm saying that in jest about quitting. Obviously, it's a sport, it's a hobby. Do it for as long as you want, right? But
you won't get lucky. You won't get lucky with that.
The people that I'm interested in training, like, at some point you have to sit down and take some self-assessment. If this is what you want to do and you want to be professional at this, right? Like, I would love to have been a professional football player, but it's not in the cards.
Yeah.
Right? The biggest thing that kept me out of the NFL was drive, skill, and talent.
Yeah.
Like, people have to be able to look at, like, hey, this is just, and if you're in one of these jobs as a professional where you're like what I would consider like you're a gun professional and you're just not getting better at it, you're using hope and luck as your primary tactic that you're going to survive your career.
Or you go for science to skip this factor of aptitude. There's someone, because Matt from XRAY Alpha told you, like, you literally suck and I don't see you in this place. And then there is company XYZ telling you, I've got a scientific approach that will solve all those issues because you're placing your left ankle in the wrong way. Yeah. And that's how it works. That's
your
how it
lack
works.
of kinesthetic proprioceptive dynamicism is just not allowing you to do the thing correctly. And it's funny when you see that. Like, I don't think, like, you see a lot of dudes too that are like in this space, like, you see it more on the tactics side, right? Like, you never see these guys shoot.
Yeah.
Maybe you make a marketing video. It's like, no, I want to see you in a 4-man team doing the CQB. Right? Your version of CQ. I want to see this nonsense and see how it works with variables.
I personally, like, when it comes to tactics and being one of the larger sites on Instagram or presences covering tactics, I think, like, a lot of tactics instructors have not an understanding for tactics on a general basis. And if we are looking at a CQB situation, a room clearing, how much tactics do actually get applied there? I don't think a lot. There are some driving principles that depend on the doctrinal framework the unit or the army is operating in.
Wait, so let me ask you this, Felix. This will be interesting. So from outside, regardless of what happens outside of the room, once we go into the room, what are the principles that we can't violate for the entrance into the room?
We can't violate tempo. Tempo is very important. We can't violate surprises, or should already be there. Keeping the initiative is important. Yeah. So executing it in an aggressive fashion. Yeah.
So we just say it different. Like it's always been the same thing: speed, surprise, violence of action.
Yeah.
Those are the principles.
I just don't wanted to use like those terms. Yeah, because terms are like applied on a lot of people are saying speed, surprise, violence of action. What does this mean? What does this mean? That's the first thing.
Felix, I'm going to out myself a little bit. When you said we have to keep tempo, so speed, I thought you were making a riff on the Temple Index. I thought you were just like doing some made up solutions shit.
Yeah, we also have to watch the different muzzle directions in the choreography. That's right.
Well, you guys think Temple Index is good. You're gonna love when Made Up Solution comes up with Groin Index.
That's a great thing. I actually have to revise the channel and get into something like that. I just wanted to record the new Made Up Solution standards next week, because the new standards really are about situational awareness. Time doesn't matter, and they are about conducting a blood sweep after you have shot the target.
Now everyone has to go home and read some JRR token just to.
Yeah, I mean, like the philosophical and mindset approach is also very important. Like you have to train those mindset related tasks. Stay true to the codex of the Bushido or whatever.
The codex of the Bushido. Dude, I saw a thing. It was hilarious. It said, you can move to Japan and live there. You can become a Japanese citizen and live there. You can live your whole life in Japan, eat sushi every day, but you'll never be Japanese.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen that dude saying that on the internet? It's hilarious.
No, but I like that.
There's a huge part like within the training world where people believe like if I just say something, then it's going to be a reality.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like this like weird motivational shit, right? You see it with like a lot of guys that might subscribe to certain pages, right? Like the Dave Goggins, the Jocko Willing, and they just watch what those guys are saying and it like pumps them up.
Yeah.
And then they don't realize why nothing ever changes for them, or because saying something means absolutely fucking nothing.
No.
You have to do the things that you're saying.
You see like a lot of people, like I call it like a dad replacement. They are seeking like a replacement for their dad or what they want to be their dad. So they are basically looking up for something that gives them like a guidance. But this wouldn't replace like doing the right thing again. Like it's all about doing the right thing, and no one can take this decision from your shoulders. Like following those pages doesn't change anything, and reciting them also.
That's probably the best description of that whole like male fucking role model, like the Jocko Willing, fucking Andrew Tate, all of that, like the cults. And I'm not going to speak on the people directly, but like the whole surrogate father figure, I've never heard it described like that, and it is innately sad and also accurate.
It is like, call it whatever, big brother replacement, father replacement, whatever.
So I don't think it's sad that of what those guys are doing. Like I understand it, right? Like whatever, but I disagree like wholeheartedly with some of the shit. Like you're good at running, so running's your shtick, right?
Yeah.
But you wake up really early, so that's your shtick. The themes are very solid though with what they say. The thing that's very discouraging and should be upsetting to people is the fact that there's a fucking market in this country of hundreds of millions of people in my country for that.
Yeah.
There are people like, are you serious? Like this is where you look to fucking Instagram for motivation.
It's pro
like
culture.
You are beyond approach, right? Or you're paying people. I've seen these, you go pay and then someone's going to scream and yell at you and put you through some sort of like mini ass Navy SEAL challenge type thing and tell you you're a piece of shit for fucking 72 hours. and then somehow that turns your fucking life around. Like, the fact that there's a market for that should be more alarming to people than what those guys are doing.
It is.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, it needs to be. It's more a lifestyle than anything else. People should just go out and do whatever they like and what makes them like satisfied with their life. And sometimes, or for some people, it may not be CrossFit, it may not be CQB classes or whatever. And when I look, like, I'm all for prepared citizens, as all of you may know. Like, citizens can train anything they want, but I think that a lot of citizens that are training certain stuff are not training it as a measure of training. They are doing it as a lifestyle statement, and they're doing it to overcome a midlife crisis, whatever.
Yeah, so I've had this conversation with people where they're like, well, you don't think civilians should be trained at CQB or whatever. And I'm like, no, I think that anyone that wants to do something should be able to do it. The hard part is that how can you make sure that their motivations are just and pure, right? Yeah. If your motivation is, I'm just interested in this and I want to put kid on in LARP, that's a very just and pure motivation, or motivation. It's like, you're doing this because you're interested in it, right? Now, if your motivation is you want to do this because you want to fight the government, that warrants a different type of conversation, because your motivation might be skewed a little bit.
Yeah,
like
it's like, I mean, it all depends, in my opinion. Like, there are people that are saying, like, if the government becomes tyrannical, whatever, they want to be prepared. If we have, like, look at Ukraine, if we have a foreign invasion, they want to be prepared. Like, there's a just cause for that, but it's about, I think the responsible citizen thing is a really important trope that just gets thrown around. But be responsible for whatever you train with.
So I think when any other country does their battle plans to look at, like, invading the United States, the number one deterrent is not the level of training of its citizens. It's the fact that every citizen owns a gun.
Yeah.
So there's no way, like, we can't fight the whole population, regardless of training, right? It doesn't matter. So that is and then also there are expeditionary capabilities that we have that other countries just don't have. It doesn't exist, right? And so that's, every time someone talks about the Ukraine scenario and applies it to the United States, like, that is a non-starter for the US.
Yeah. I mean,
it just isn't.
I mean, it's all about, I personally think, if I would plan to invade the United States, what I would look at first is, of course, which defensive capabilities are there, like, let's say, Navy, Air Force, Army, whatever, because this is the first screen an army has to pass. And if I manage to somehow land in the US, like, there's the moral cohesion of the United States at that point. And like we've seen in Ukraine, that moral cohesion means a lot, but usually, like, if there's a weak point in moral cohesion among the population, and we are often just projecting that to our tactical bubble that's there. So how big is the moral cohesion of the whole population? And as you stated, like, everyone has a rival is a big thing when the moral cohesion is there to not surrender or whatever. It's like the coin 101. The next thing is, I don't think, and I stated that in many stories, that those that are training like tactics right now won't be the first line of defense, or many of those won't be the first line of defense when it comes to defending the population from whatever. Like, history has shown that over and over.
No, I think they also don't realize, like, those people don't realize what warfare looks like. That's not a, everybody sees it and thinks it's like a movie type instance. And it's like, you think you're going to stand up against the tyrannical government. Well, that's fine when the citizens in the government have the same thing. Right. And I'm all for the population needs to be armed. But that being armed, that's against, like, it's like pumping up our rights. It's, hey, keeping everything in check. But the idea that you think if at some point the U.S. military turns into the country, it's a losing fight.
I think if we are looking at this at a like very isolated, like the whole, like let's look at civil wars and how they evolve. Usually it's like a part of the military, some part won't refuse. And people don't know how ruthless war is, and people don't know how ruthless civil war is, because civil war is you will also fight against your own population. Like,
yeah, and that's one thing I hope that, like, for Americans, they realize, like, at the end of the day, like a civil war needs to be taken off we're all Americans. Like, we shouldn't be fighting each other. Like, that's a lose-lose situation for everyone, regardless of who ends up
that's a thing
winning.
That should never be like the goal or anything. And even if we are looking at this Ukraine scenario, there's so many like decisions you have to make that blow some people's mind. Like, for example, if there's like an occupied territory with, let's say, a proxy government getting in place, a Russian proxy government, and you have to execute your neighbor who's running for the election for the proxy, let's say the proxy principle. Yeah, that's what civil war is about, and that's what people should get into their minds. It's not it's the most dirty war you can imagine. Like when we had the elections in Afghanistan, they had like militia members and insurgents setting up checkpoints to look if citizens or if Afghan citizens did go to vote. And what they did was cutting off their thumbs, because everyone got like, they had like this ink, yeah, because every Afghan had like about 20 passports, and they did put this ink to their fingers to signal they already voted. So what they did was setting up illegal checkpoints and cutting off thumbs of people who voted. Like,
oh god,
yeah.
That's something. This is what civil war is. Yeah.
I don't think anyone that wants it is being intellectually honest. Like I and probably anyone listening to this, and probably everyone in general can agree. The world has a lot of problems, but violence, especially violence of that scale, should never be anyone's first option.
Yeah.
No, I think everyone, like the whole veteran population, like everyone that's seen war will say, like, they don't want it. They're not entertaining the idea of it. Right. Yeah. And then also I think it just plays into, so this is an interesting thing to think about too, is, are we any worse off than we ever have been? Or is just information pushed out so fast that trends can happen and you can sway people's opinions and like get people ramped up so much more quickly?
Did people, like, they are getting so much information, it's like overwhelming for a lot of people.
That's an interesting one. You're absolutely right that you can sway information, and rage culture has become such a thing. And it always really has been, swaying the masses through. It's easier to keep someone angry than it is to keep someone pacified in any other way.
Yeah.
And if you keep someone angry, it's very easy to manipulate them to basically believe or do whatever you want. That being said, if we're going to go off like standardized metrics of what makes bad, what constitutes suffering or things getting objectively worse. And there are measures of that. And, in some ways things are getting better. In some ways things are getting a lot worse. And I'm not really going to get into the weeds of, like, what's right and what's wrong. The whole thing is, an objective problem. All I know is I went to the store the other day and eggs were $10, and I make double 2.5 times what I did a couple years ago, and my standard of living hasn't changed, and various little things like that. What I feel myself as opposed to what I'm being told to be angry about, and I feel a lot of people are feeling that. Obviously, this doesn't and shouldn't feed into violent rhetoric or fantasies, but I feel like a lot of people are feeling the pinch, and that makes them upset.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think I know for myself personally, I would really take some mean tweets and gas at $1.80 a gallon.
Yeah.
Type days.
Yeah.
But I think that's where you talk about like how information is pushed out, like the things that now there's a huge problem, I think, in our country with like single issue voters.
Yeah.
Yes.
They don't look at like what's actually good for the country. They don't even give a shit about the economy because they're not saving money. They're not invested in the stock market. They're just concerned about this one thing.
Yeah. And headline voters.
Yeah. If you don't support this weird ass subculture rights, then I'm not voting for you. Or this one thing where I think at some point you have to sit back and look at like, hey, what's going to be the best for our country as a whole going forward?
As a compromise type of thing, you mean?
Yeah. And it's not going to be like, I'm relatively happy with like, you start to see now a lot of celebrities and like bigger following people and people with platforms that are like, hey, this woke shit has to stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's out of control. Like you're destroying lives. Like this doesn't make sense.
No.
And it's like I don't think at any point it makes sense to where we're going to pander to 0.5% of the population, regardless of how big their bandwagon is.
Yeah, it goes in both directions. Like no one can be like, especially if you're part of a minority, no one can be like 100% satisfied with whatever decision is made.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say like this conversation's taken a weird turn. I think we need to go back to like tactics. Nathan, let's talk.
Yeah, man, it's getting.
I would say like, we need to go back to like dick and fart jokes. Like we're getting too serious about things that nobody wants to listen to a 2-hour podcast and be entertained about.
Yeah, this is a little darker than some, but hey, I mean, it's the Art and War podcast. We get into the weeds sometimes. You got a good dick or fart joke for us?
I don't. Nothing that I want to say online. No, but I just say like, I always thought like, dude, when the conversation gets too serious, like the guys I work with, I'm like, dude, we need to go back to dick and fart jokes. Like, keep it light. Like, let's talk about the stuff that's the 2% of the world care about, like made up solutions and
made up solutions is the future. I mean, aside from Project Echo, there's no other company that's like as straightforward into the future.
That would be some very good posts, Felix, to start doing, is drawing parallels between made up solutions and Project Gecko.
I already see a lot.
Yeah.
There's this
the
whole
fact that
geometric
they're both completely made up. It's the number one parallel.
I mean, the geometrics theme is real. Like there are a lot of people talking about geometrics when it comes to.
Dude, so I've been like hitting that guy up pretty hard to like do a live discussion about CQB. Project Gecko. I think his name is like Elion or
Eliron. Yeah.
Eliron or something. Project Gecko. He's a Israeli CQB guy that.
Yeah, he's the former IDF guy, I think.
Yeah. So I've been like hitting him pretty hard, and he won't respond to me. I'm not blocked yet, which is absolutely amazing. But like, hey, let's just have this conversation about tactics, like, the limb pen thing, right? Because I posted a video. I may repost this video, and it's of 88 Tactical doing limb pen CQB. Their instructors doing it, and if you watch it, it is so bad.
Yeah.
And ended up having conversations with the owners of that company or whatever, and I was like, hey, I was a little bit newer to Instagram. I was like, all right, man, look, I'll take it down, but whatever. Created a whole shitstorm. But really, it's like that video was posted on one of your instructors. That's where I got the video from. Was your instructor's face?
Which instructors were this again? Was this the? I think I saw this in your story a little while ago. Was this the guy with the? There's a close up of a Punisher skull on someone's hat. Or am I thinking of a different one?
No, that's a different one.
Yeah.
No, this was like, there's like a huge push, right, for this limited penetration CQB.
Okay, this wasn't CQB. I'm thinking of something else.
Yeah. Oh, and no, and
this was just hard skills.
Yeah, and they're like, oh no, the Punisher, the blind fire, the guy shooting behind him while he's retreating.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was like, that never disappoints. Some international like instructor activity.
Yeah.
Some blind fire with temple index. It was magical what he was doing.
Yeah.
No, but there's a huge push for like this limited penetration CQB. And I think it's, so one, it comes from a point where like all the guys promoting it have very, very low levels of experience. Yeah. I'll say that, whether it's Trevor Thrasher with 88 Tactical, he's a 19th National Guard SF, very low level of experience in terms of actual application. Project Gecko guy, very low level of experience in terms of practical application. I think most of him probably comes from an airsoft type background, right? Would love to talk to him about it on a live format.
I mean, it would be really interesting. He also blocked us. I don't know why, but let's say it's like interesting to see like all those guys advertising limited penetration, creating like a cult-like following based on their scientific measures to underline that. And now I will say something that my experience is like limited to military experience, and I think that limited penetration in general, like as a general application, violates the doctrinal framework in which Western armies work. It violates them. I want to be fast. I want to provoke decisive battle very fast. I want this dueling situation because I know that our guys are at least trained to shoot faster and better. So I want to go all in.
Come on, Felix. Don't you want to just hang out in a doorway, crack a beer?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. It over the top. So I would look at it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, right? That has been passed down or whatever. Guys think they've learned it or whatever. They think they understand its history, and its history comes from a combat clearing mentality that was a direct response to a threat in like the 2005-2006 timeframe. Yeah. But my issue with it is like, you're selling it as a system, and people love it because it's the best way to take people that shouldn't be doing CQB and allow them to do CQB.
Absolutely.
Because it relies heavily on very mediocre skill sets in terms of hard skills, in terms of decision making, and it gives you a lot of, like, if I say, oh, this is behaviorally based. Well, behaviorally based CQB for U.S. law enforcement is an uncommitted, unopposed, undedicated adversary. So really, any CQB you would do typically will be successful because the guys you're going after aren't willing to fight.
Yeah.
If you would look at like how many entries are made versus how many guys, how many times they engage in fights inside a structure. And then on the Israeli side, they're looking at it as a counterterrorism threat to a very different type of enemy with very different types of motives, but also buildings that are built very differently than how they are in the US.
Yeah.
So there's no real like applicate like the combat clearing when that was kind of, hey, we're going to do this TTP. There's no need to run in that room, where there are times, and I'm a huge proponent of this. I understand it, like, but there's two elements that have to be present if you're going to be effective at doing a slow, deliberate clear. It needs to be completely dark, and you do it under nods. And the walls need to stop bullets. If any one of those two things are not present, that technique is not your best option. But people love it because it's very slow. It's slow and deliberate, so you don't have to have good decision-making skills. You don't have to have good movement skills. You don't have to be able to shoot fast and accurate. Like, so you can have a very mediocre skill set and still do this.
Yeah. You're clearly like avoiding the dueling situation, which is like dominated by hard skills.
I really wanted to make a joke there about what kind of CQB the Israeli like IDF trains for, but I think the ADL would legitimately drone strike my house, so I'm not going to do that.
I think too there's all of these guys that come from their IDF. It's like, okay, I got it. You did your 2 or 3 years of mandatory service.
Yeah, you've killed 6 Palestinian children. That's okay.
There's a really famous guy, right? Whatever, Cherry, that claims to be in the Yaman, but he wrote a book about it, but he was never in the Yaman. Like, it's all the same. It's even because it's highly unvettable, so they can say whatever they want. And it's very telling to where none of these guys will come on and do a conversation with me about what they're teaching, or like, hey, let's talk about this from a first-person experience. Because I'll tell you, the Gecko dude is only, I believe, like, I don't think this guy realizes how many people know him that send me messages.
Yeah.
Like,
oh man.
He's like an airsofter.
Yeah.
Like that's he was in the IDF, got out, right, did the mandatory service, and then just got out, and then became an airsofter in Europe.
To my research, it's like he became known when he was like getting active in the airsoft, milsim, whatever community, and offering classes. And at some point, it turned into like professional classes.
This episode was brought to you by AWS, Advanced Warfighting Solutions.
We use the shit out of their gear here at On War.
Everything's made in North Carolina, and they make everything.
Everything.
I'm a big fan of their SMU War Belt, the snack pack, their assault pack, their plate carrier, kind of a big fan of everything. And they've been around for a long time with a lot of hard use kit.
Overseas and here at home.
Sorry, I'm just reattaching my phone. Sorry, it'd come loose. This is my fidget spinner, okay?
I know. AWS is our longest running sponsor, and they've helped us do a little bit of everything here at On War, from keeping the guides coming out by providing Nathan a new iPad, as well as chucking gear our way so we can get out there on the range.
Tough as hell gear so they can help us go LARP in the woods.
Yep, my assault pack comes out with me every time I'm in the woods. If you want to pick up a one-and-done Molly pistol belt, look no further than the AWS SMU belt. Use code ONWAR10 for $10 off. We get no kickbacks, you just save money. Link to their site down in the description and in the Seaburn art page's bio. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
I kind of think we should tell a joke to lighten things up for a second. I just want to ask you, what do you call a Buddhist potato?
A what?
What do you call a Buddhist potato?
I don't know. A Buddhist
meditator.
A meditator?
That was a good one.
Okay, y'all get back to it. I just wanted to do that.
You're doing your meditation later on, Matt?
Yeah, let me get right at it.
Wait, one more. How many Germans does it take to change a light bulb?
Tell me.
How many?
1. They're efficient and they lack humor. Okay, yes. Back to CQB.
Okay.
Felix doesn't lack humor. He's a pretty funny German.
He's a very funny German.
I'm one of the two who possess a sense of humor. So yeah, we're a small group. Yeah, generally back to CQB, back to tactics. I think that Matt is addressing an important point when it comes to like mediocre hard skills. That's a thing we can see exemplary in most training offers that are there, because people are like, how often did you hear the argument of it's easier to train? You know what I mean? Like the whole slide release stuff and all that stuff. When people say it's easier to train, like it's a hard thing, so we do like a workaround technique, to do just that, but it's slower. It's the whole slide release thing versus slide thing,
Yeah.
and it's a very common phenomenon in all regards to training.
I think it is, because people don't realize like what it takes, one, to maintain like a high level of proficiency, or to achieve a high level of proficiency, and then to maintain it.
Yeah.
Not for a year for like, so for me, like for 12 years.
Yeah.
Top level, like balls out, CQB, processing speed, everything for 12 years, like day in and day out. That is your job. That's the only thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. If you're not shooting or you're not doing CQB, you're working out.
Yeah.
Right. And then when all of those things are done, you're with your family. Right. Yeah. You're trying to keep some semblance of normality. But these guys see that and they're like, well, I want to do that. Like, okay, I can give you the pathway on how to do that. Step one, it's like, I'm going to give you some information, right, up to a point. And then step two, I'm turning it back to you for work. And that's where you see people's interest dip off.
Yeah. When
as soon as now,
for repetitions. Yeah.
I ask you
people don't like to acknowledge that a lot of these skills are really, really, really fucking perishable.
They're damn perishable.
They don't see it. Like it's 9:15 where I'm at right now. We'll finish this. I will lay down, go to sleep. I'll be up at 5:00 in the morning, and within 3 or 4 minutes, I'll have a gun or a blade on me, and I'll be dry firing.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'll do a 15-minute session. I'll take a shower. I'll drink a little shake. I'll get some coffee. I'll wait an hour and a half, and then I'll be into another session with a different setup. Like, people don't, they don't like, get it.
Like any kind of hard skill, be it physical fitness, like hard skills are like, if you're stopping, they are usually like progressing in this fashion. You're getting like, if you stopping to work out, for example, you're getting like a slight performance boost because you're stopping for a few days, and after that it rapidly like degrades.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see different times of like diminishing returns, and you're trying to gauge, like, you're always trying to balance overtraining, because in terms of like preparedness, you're maintaining a certain level of skill, and then different elements of that you're either ramping up or ramping down, based off what you're doing. And I think a lot of people look at it as like, well, no, this is like a hobby type thing. And for a lot of us, this isn't a hobby. Like, for the people that I'm trying to affect within the industry are the guys where it's not a hobby. This is your job. So I just want you to take a little bit more interest in it and try to give you kind of rounded corner pathways on how to get there faster.
Yeah.
But really, it still comes down to like, you've got to work on it. You know, like you want to be good at anything, it takes work.
Yeah, it takes work. And that's the thing. Like when I mean, we should clearly, if you're not following Matt XRAY Alpha at Instagram, like he's literally posting dry fire or courses of fire like daily, almost. And
really useful stuff. Really useful stuff.
Really useful stuff. And like when he comes up with something and I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, I didn't consider that. But just watching that video does not replace me doing it and looking if it works out for me or something.
Yeah. And for me, I'm like, the guys that I generally associate with, you know, between like Ben and Mike and Chris, the dudes that you will normally see on the lives, the number one interest for any of us is that guys get better.
Yeah.
And then we're continually trying to get better ourselves, and develop and do things. So like I tell everybody the same thing. The way that I shot in 2022 is not the way I shoot in 2023. And I would hope that everything stays consistent, and I will shoot differently in 2024. And training evolves, you know, it's like things that we thought were important in the early 2000s, I think there's a different approach to training now.
But I think it's like, especially shooting, it evolves. But we have to consider like that it evolves like slowly and consistent. And it's not like someone appearing and saying like, okay, you now have to draw your gun in a reverse fashion, or you now have to do whatever. And that's the thing, like the whole paradigm changing aspect that some people work with. Okay, we are doing something completely else. Don't look at Matt, who's like, I think your approach to shooting is still pretty like conservative, yeah, in some kinds of ways. Like you're doing like clean and fast shooting, and you're not saying like, okay, you have to do something completely else. I mean, like the most different thing I learned from you was like getting into Ben's whole target focus thing and vision thing. That really changed a lot. But it's not like, okay, you're creating shooting, you're recreating shooting from in one day, you know?
No, so I think if you look at that, like the evolution of things that I was focused on in 2019. So I retired in 2020, you know, and formed my company in 2019 before I was out, and then started training guys actively in 2020. And things that I kind of valued at that point, I no longer value.
Yeah.
Because of the evolution. And the evolution came from my interest, one, in me getting better, two, in helping other guys get better. And I haven't taken shooting courses. You know, I've had the opportunity to shoot with a lot of the best guys in the world because of the military, you know, and that, but it was never a course structure at the place I worked. It wasn't, they came in and we just shot together and training happened in a very loose format. But what I looked at, what I always liked from that type of training was like the simplistic approach that the top level guys had.
Yeah. That's what I meant with conservative. Like, there's no magical thing you can do.
Yeah. So I look at it like, hey, we can have a 2-hour discussion about how to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a waste of fucking time. Like what I've found, like if we fix the grip and we fix your vision, everything else falls into place.
I mean, like I did go through like various stages when it comes to this. When I was like a private first class or something, the whole MacPull shit came out, and I was totally into it. Actually, I admit this because there wasn't like anything else, and like of course yes, there was practical shooting, but I was totally convinced it will get you killed. Like, I admit this because
Yeah.
everyone is thinking the wrong things at some point, and I totally admit it. And like, it was like a few years ago when a lieutenant colonel, who's actually like Stefan, if you hear that, thank you again. Like, who's actually a practical shooter, turned me like to practical shooting, and he said like, that's basically what you have to do. It's simple. Don't consider the whole tactical things and all that stuff.
So the funny thing is, when all that Magpul stuff was coming out, I was at the unit, and we would sit in the team room drinking beers, just clowning on those guys.
Yeah.
And it was like, you're watching like, no, it's stupid, that's dumb, or whatever. And we would watch. We probably gave them thousands of views on YouTube because it was comic relief, right? But at that time, like, we knew what we were doing, and we were doing it for a much different reason, right? And we saw that, and it was like, there was literally nothing that you would take away in that 2010 era where it's like, no, it's all garbage. And then we just saw people dumping into it, and we were more focused on like our own little echo chamber, a performance driven, result based business type activity, and not selling DVDs.
I mean, the performance driven aspect was like the core thing for me, like to see, okay, I don't care for what if a target appears behind me or whatever. I don't care for this because I can make up a new what if whenever I want to. And I'm still not getting better at taking out that target. And
the thing is, like, all of this stuff divulges down into into a practical shooting methodology.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day, regardless of where you're standing in the room, it's like, hey, I'm here, bad guy's there, we're going to deliver energy to them.
Yeah.
How we scored or whatever, whoever can do that the fastest is the guy that wins. So if a target pops up behind you, hey, there's a thing for that in practical shooting. Turn and draws.
Yeah.
And now we delivered energy faster than real life to that guy. We turned around and we're going to deliver energy to that guy faster than real life.
I mean, we can totally take this to extremes. Like, we can say we are coming up with the perfect tactical consideration. Let's say, okay, we have developed a perfect tentative plan, and it really works out. But we have one issue: none of our guys hits the target. What would this result in? It won't result in victory. Like, just this extreme example. On the other hand, if we are coming up with a mediocre or bad plan, and we are going in and like we have great marksmen, like they're doing it in some kind of way, they're hitting all the targets, they're fast, they're accurate, they will at least mitigate the bad tactics we applied to some point.
Well, Felix, what's the best type of suppressive fire?
It should be lethal. That's the best kind of suppressive fire, in my opinion. I think suppressive fire in general is a misnomer.
Yeah, the best type of suppressive fire is accurate fire.
Exactly. It should be casualty producing. Like, I like the term, like, or I like to say, like, it's called the support element for a reason, because it should support. It's not the suppression element. It should be as lethal as possible right now.
100%.
And like, it's the whole thing. If you're saying like, oh, you don't need to aim during a suppressive fire because of tactical considerations, it shouldn't be lethal or whatever. It's like you're pushing mediocre skill sets. And you have so many guys saying like, you don't need to shoot fast or very accurate in combat.
You do. That's the one thing that drives me nuts, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's combat accurate. Combat accurate is like making the bullets go exactly where you want them to go.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain like individual skills that rarely like apply in combat, and like for example the GPMG is doing most of the work and so on and so on, but there's nothing bad about having excellence in certain skill sets. There's nothing bad about it, and you should do it.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
No, go ahead, Nathan. What's up?
No, I think it's an excuse a lot of people use simply to hold themselves less accountable for their standard of training.
I actually have a great example on a fork process I did wrong, because at some point I made fun of guys training speed reloads, like, and there's like I was, luckily I wasn't like saying it's bad to do it, but I was just reducing the importance to other skills. And for me, like, I was saying like there's no historical account of a speed reload saving a life, and I actually did my research, and there are plenty of.
So I have a few instances for me personally, 3, where I had a 416 that liked to do. It was sort of shot out. It was still accurate, but it was hyper gassed to where when I got below the 25th round, I would get a bolt over round, not round over bolt malfunction. So the way to clear it is literally reload the gun very quickly.
Yeah.
Right. And so speed reloads, that happened to me 3 times in engagements. The worst one was a very close engagement inside about 11 to 15 meters where I'm shooting and I get to 25 rounds and I go bolt override. And it was literally like, boom, drop the mag, right? Insert another mag, rack the charging handle and shoot.
Yeah. And even if you don't get into that situation, in my opinion, you will get like more confident in what you are doing if you are able to do that fast.
So I think in terms of the difference, in my opinion, between a fast shooter and not a fast shooter are guys that can do all of the shit that's not shooting faster.
Yeah.
There's no negative effect to be like, I've got a down gun, I get it back up fast. There's no negative effect to that.
Yeah.
So like you train it, and then now it looks at like when you go back to the training side, we're going to value consistency over speed all the time. Because if we value speed over consistency, we're never going to get to being fast.
Yeah.
Right? Because so we learn how to do consistent loads originally, first, and now we start trimming the fat off of it. We start rounding the corners on how we sequence the skills, from how we identify that we have a stoppage or we're out of rounds, to getting a magazine exchange in there and then sending the bolt home. You just round those skills out, but when it's consistent, that's the first step to being fast, I believe.
Yeah. Consistency and the weapon not becoming a burden.
I can't remember who I heard this from, and it was fairly recent, but it stands in my head. You want to learn tactics, learn it, from an infantier, from someone who learns tactics. You want to learn, specific things, you learn it from someone who does those specific things. You want to learn shooting, learn it from a practical shooter. And that's what a lot of what I'm getting.
I think it
actually,
was
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. It's peak efficiency.
That was one of the best life training things I learned from the unit was when we were jumping with professional skydivers.
Yeah.
Guys with the farthest thing in their mind is the military. But we learned from the guys that have 20, 30,000 jumps.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When we learned driving, we went to race car drivers, right? Guys that can drive at Baja off-road at 200 miles an hour can teach you how to drive tactically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? They can teach you control. when we went to shooting, we went to world champions. We didn't go to anyone that had any fucking tactical background. The one time we brought Todd Jarrett in, it lasted like 3 days, and it was like, yeah, that guy will never come back because you want to talk tactics and we want to shoot.
Yeah.
Right. So we went to the practical guys. And that's where you learn, like, when you're training yourself, learn how to be a good thief. Right. Go to an expert. Right. If I want to learn, if I need to learn computer stuff, I'm going to the Geek Squad type dude.
I'm going to a tactical IT instructor because he's training for combat.
Yeah.
Combat electronics.
I'm going to the dude that built the iPad, not the guy that sells the iPad.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The more I learn about just, as you said, hard skills are quantifiable. There's metrics for it. There's hit factors, there's speed, there's practical accuracy, there's all of that. And the more that I actually take the time and, I'm not the best shooter in the world. I'm not the worst shooter. I go to the range once a week. I do my drills. I can measure myself and I can see what works and I can see what doesn't. And the more that I actually do that and the more time that I spend listening to people who shoot all the time, people like you, people like Ben Steger, people like, any general practical shooter. I'd like to thank Colin Underdahl, who's been fantastic for, I'll call him at night and say, hey, fix my grip. What am I doing wrong? And he'll help and we'll drill through stuff. The more I see that a lot of the bro vet sort of, I'm not going to name any names here, but I remember seeing a video a little while ago from a particular Bushido that talked about, when you grip your pistol, you push up with your last two fingers and you do all this jiggery pokery, and none of it made any sense and it didn't translate. It wasn't repeatable and it was complicated. It was exactly what Felix was saying earlier, which was people want to just make things up so they stand out, when in actuality, the hard skills that are needed to do this are a lot simpler than people realize.
In the tactical training world where a lot of this bullshit resides, it's guys' interest in being unique rather than being right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all the dudes. And I will say the names, right? It's Ronin Tactics. It's Two Lamb. It's the Mike Glovers. It's just nonsensical shit. And what you'll see is that a lot of these guys have misrepresented themselves as one thing when they already had relatively very good pedigrees if they just left one thing out, but they couldn't do it. And that's my big issue with them, right? You couldn't not tell people, like, you had to go around and tell people that you were a unit operator, and you weren't, right? And that's my rub with it. It's like you misrepresented yourself, but you see it where it all washes out in terms of, are you selling a product and building a company, or are you training yourself?
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that those guys are building like small groups that are based, and I see that in a lot of factors in the industry, that are based on, okay, guy XY is telling bullshit and guy YZ is also telling bullshit, but they don't call out each other because everyone knows, okay, XY is telling bullshit and the other guy is also telling bullshit.
Yeah.
So they won't call each other out and form a circle that creates like credibility for them.
They develop like these cult-like followings.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what it is. Like, no, I've come behind Mike with agencies that I've trained where they've told me the things that he said and that he did. And I'm like, and I'm not going out of my way. I'm just like, nope. Like, the best one was I was training some guys out in California and I was like, hey, we did some shooting for 3 days and we did 2 days of CQB, and they're like, well, Mike says this, Mike says this. I go, look, man, I understand that. I go, but me and Mike are going to have a different view on CQB because I was an operator and he wasn't. And you would have thought that I told these motherfuckers that fucking the Easter Bunny wasn't real. They were floored. And I was like, let's keep training. Like, you can't come in and like tell people something that's not true. And then someone comes behind you. Like, I'm not going to prop up your fantasy. Like, you didn't do that job. Like, stop using that as a marketing tool.
Yeah.
Right. Use your real experience as the marketing tool. Right. And then it can be my view of CQB versus your view of CQB. And we can talk about that in absence of a pedigree.
I mean,
that's actually something that I really appreciate about your content. You show everything. You don't just talk about, hey, I carry this SIG P365 because I got it for free from SIG and I don't want to spoil my relationship with them.
Yeah.
Instead, you show practical results. And I appreciate that. It's something that cannot be faked.
No, I show like what I do, and it's like between, for me, like the growth of my company or anything has been completely organic. Like, I don't do it because it's not, I don't run a multi-million-dollar industry where I'm selling every sort of fucking trinket with my label on it. Any time I think I'm like, I
would buy some XRAY alpha
yeah, like
water.
I bought like probably $4,000 worth of hats and t-shirts, and I couldn't bring myself to sell them.
I just imagine, and there's a back room behind you that is just stacked to the ceiling with cardboard boxes.
I'm
joking.
I gave them away. It's like when dudes would hit me up on Instagram and they're like, where can I buy this? Like, oh man, I'm trying. Cause I have like a shop page on my website, but people don't realize like XRAY Alpha is just me. There's no team behind it. There's no whatever. Like, I still work in this field operationally. And then I teach because I'm very dedicated to guys getting better. But it's like, when dudes are like, man, just send me your address, I'll send you a fucking hat. Like, and I'll send dudes hats. And then it's like, but that growth is organic. It's not, I'm not selling anything. I'm not selling some shit I used to do. I'm trying to help people get better at shooting.
Yeah.
And then you apply it to whatever you want.
Well,
and I'll do tactics for agencies and organizations, but also I think I do it differently than other people, where I'm very, like, you want to train tactics, we're going to have multiple phone conversations and conference calls, like, to be very specific about what you want to get out of it.
Yeah. I think it's the same, especially when people are talking tactics. Like, tactics is a field that has been like really abused. And if we are talking about what I call it, like tactics for grown-ups, like if we are talking about actual tactical decision making, that's first off usually not a class that's taught like on a range or something. Like, you have got a lot of lecturing material, you have got a lot of thing to rehearse. Like, it's the exact opposite of hard skills. It's the exact opposite. And then you go out to a fitting training ground to try that out. And with not an instructor running behind you and saying, okay, you placed your feet on the right side, on the wrong side of something. Let's restart that exercise.
I do tactics differently for agencies, where we will shoot live twice in a 5-day course.
Yeah.
To where, because I believe so many things get missed on the Sims versus paper, or even in the Force on Force world. Guys will do things with a Sims gun that they absolutely wouldn't attempt with a live rifle. So I try to draw parallels to where I'm not going to overhaul your tactics. I'm going to help you do what you want to do more efficiently. And then I'm going to show you how to tie it in tie your range stuff in to support your TTPs that you want to do in the house. And I think no one's doing that. They're just doing like, they're doing their version of like, this is what I know. This is what I know on training. And like, even the tactical companies are missing it because they don't we have a group of people, guys that I've interfaced with between Ben, all the PSTG guys, a bunch of law enforcement guys. Like, we are pushing the performance side of shooting and evolving it at a pace that I don't think most people can keep up with.
Yeah. It's like when you are training like shooting as a very dedicated and professional skill, it's the same for training or discussing tactics. It's like two entirely different fields. You can like measure what you're capable of when combining both, but both need to be also trained in an isolated fashion. And that's why we got invitations from like the US Army Warfighting Society, stuff like that. I mean, those are the guys that are like training tactics on a very professional level at very different levels of tactics. And people are not aware of, like, as we said before, like in a firefight, there's not a lot of place for tactics. There isn't that much of decision making going on. If we are talking about preparing an assault or a raid, about the whole preparation stuff, that's where your tactics come in and where you fuck up the mission on the tactical level. If the approach is wrong or something, then you can fuck up the mission really hard. But
people are confused
during the mission.
People are confusing, Felix, tactics with techniques, and they just encompass it to where there's going to come a point where, post con op, your op order, like everyone understands what the tactic is we're going to apply. Now you have to start delegating, like the small unit leaders take over, and now it's a technique world. It's not a tactic world. The tactic is already established, and I don't think a lot of people understand that.
I mean, like if you're on a mission and let's say like between two firefights, like one contact has been broken, there is the time and place to like at least rework the plan, and said, okay, good, we will flank from now on. We will try to do a flanking approach. That's a tactical decision that happens during the mission. But even that is nothing that you are training in a few hour kill house training or whatever. That's something that's very hard to train, especially with civilian capabilities. And I think that like tactical decision games or something are the best way to like train that from a civilian perspective and even from a military perspective. Like that's where you do your tactics and you just doing the field training exercise as a control measure for that.
I agree with that. And I think that a lot of the US Army stuff is trained that way. But I think when you get into like the civilian training world, people confuse tactics and techniques regularly.
Yeah, they do. They do. And that's a big issue. And tactics is coming up with an own solution. But even for techniques, like there's not, if you're not modifying a technique or not able to modify it on the run because it's super complex, you will have issues. So simplicity is like a leading thing. If you're looking at like large scale operations like whatever, Desert Storm or whatever, if you're looking at it in detail, it was a very complex operation. But if you're looking at it from an easy perspective or from an officer's perspective, an officer is still able to explain this operation to every grunt in a few sentences. Yeah. And that's simplicity. And you don't need to have like 70 Instagram posts and science-based blog entries to explain like how to cut a corner in a room. I would like to see like an op-ord that guys like that try to formulate. I would love to see an op-ord. I think it would be like the size of a book or something.
So I think and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about before. People don't think simplicity is sexy. So if you muddle things up with as many buzzwords as you possibly can, it sells better. And we saw that, we continue to see that with made-up solutions, and the fact people are asking about training schedules.
They have been asking for schedules and for class dates. And
When people,
that
and
tells
I'm not
us
going
a
to
lot
fault
about the
people.
industry.
Yep.
when people ask for schedules for made up solutions, Felix, you need to tell them, like, bring the Instagram page up, because it's only Instagram, right? This is where you got this information from. So first and foremost, you're fucking wrong for looking for tactical information on Instagram. But now say the name of the company out loud to yourself 3 times, and then see if you want to call me back for a for a training schedule.
My favorite thing was the graph that you had, which is like you have to focus on your spiritual mind. Read Sun Tzu and also J.R.R. Tolkien, and right next to and the big thing: read the name out loud. Read the name out loud, and if you still think this is a legitimate, I mean, it is a legitimate training company. I did all my courses at Made Up Solutions, and I'm really good at tactical-based vector kinetics now.
Say it 3 times out loud. Like, I'm training at Made Up Solutions. I'm training at Made Up Solutions. You should get it by the second time that it's fucking not real.
If you're not able to do that, tactics might be the wrong topic for you, all in all.
I'm telling you, I honestly think, too, with the way the industry is, Felix, I could pull off of XRAY Alpha and shut it down for 2 weeks. That would be an interesting experiment to see how big of a following could we build with Made Up Solutions. I bet in 30 days, focusing on tactics, we could get over 100,000.
I mean, we can set up a Made Up Solutions class the next time I visit the US.
I'd go to that.
And we teach it.
People can pay you $4,000 to yell at them.
I even have the fitting tools.
That would be interesting to be like, hey, it's a 2-day class. It's $3,700. Vector-based CQB with kinesthetic, practical application, performance-based shooting metrics.
That's
30
mind-blowing. You're currently
$3,700. Don't worry, lunch is provided every day.
Lunch is provided every day. Yeah, like that's the main thing I care for at the class. Yeah, but for some guys, it's really like more of an event or something else. And I'm pretty much convinced that there are people that want to learn like made up stuff. They want to do that. They want to do weird shit. Deep in their heart, they want to do it. And they don't want to. Yeah, I don't. I think there is a market for that. And
now, take it out of the context of tactical thing. Like, I want to do weird shit. What do you got? Like, what are we doing? That's interesting to me. You got some weird shit? Let's do it.
I mean, you can come up with whatever formulation or whatever. You can just connect words in a non-ending circle, and you somehow can like prove that what you are doing is right in theory.
Yeah.
Like you're getting the scientific background and all that stuff.
So here's what we have to do. We get an AI app, like a content writer AI app, right? So there's these AI apps where you can say, hey, I want a bluegrass song about my truck breaking down. And within a couple minutes, AI will spit it out. So we just say, I want a tactic class on vector-based CQB programming, and they will make our own curriculum. They'll make the curriculum.
We have unlimited posts. That's great.
And then we can both be IDF background.
Right? Me, tactics-based class. Yeah, I got it right now.
Do you do it right now? Science-based
class on
CQB.
science-based CQB. Title: Science-based CQB training. Objective: the objective of this training is to provide students with scientific principles that can be applied to real-world scenarios. Oh my god, this is going like fast.
This is the nonsense shit that you see in.
Holy shit. Science-based CQB training provides students with deep understandings of physiological and psychological factors at play in high-stress situations. By combining scientific principles and practical training, students will be better prepared to face real-world scenarios with confidence and proficiency. ChatGPT literally just spat out an entire course.
I mean, like, if you're comparing it with some offers out there, it's pretty much
the same shit that they say. This is what you get. Like,
yeah,
it's regurgitated nonsense. It's companies that have zero experience, and I'll say it, like, it's not limited experience. Like, you have no fucking experience at this. You have some military experience and other things, and then your interest level was high. You saw a market for money, a way to make money, and you capitalized on it. And now it's like, you see it, like, just an AI input gives you pretty much the same outcome that you get with, like, a Haley strategic, a 88 tactical, a Gecko, Project Gecko training. It's the same bullshit.
Holy shit. I just put in talk about vector-based kinetics in CQB, and it gave me an entire write-up, like a page. I'm going to copy paste this into the chat because it's very fucking funny to me. And you made this up. This is important to say. Like, this is a made up thing. Vector-based kinetics is an essential scientific principle in close quarters battle. The principle of vector-based kinetics involves the study of movement and behavior of objects in three-dimensional spaces, as well as the use of vectors to represent the magnitude and direction of the movement. And it keeps on going. It's
so
all
if you
just
don't
buzzwords.
See that this is what, like, Nathan's doing this on an AI computer program, and this is
this is all real time.
The AI computer program has never done CQB, which is the same thing for Project Gecko, which is the same thing for 88 Tactical. It's fucking garbage. It's the same shit, man. Like, anyone that's promoting limb pen CQB as a viable tactic, you have not done fucking CQB in real life.
The shooter must understand how to calculate the bullet's trajectory and compensate for gravity, wind, and the target's movement in CQB. Holy shit. By understanding how to apply force in a way that disrupts the target vectors, the team can effectively control this.
So when we advertise this, is this actually AI?
Dude, that was even better.
Oh god.
Like, it's
AI backed CQB. That's what I mean. And you know what? And then you get the same result too, where, like, hey, let's reach out to the AI. Let's do a live. Well, I can't do a live because I'm AI, which is the same thing you hear from Project Gecko, from 88. It's the same thing. You guys are fucking clowns. It's people don't apply the tiniest amount of critical thinking into what you're doing, right? And what you see.
Yeah.
If you're looking to social media, and this is weird because I put a ton of shit on social media for training, but if you're looking to social media as your sole source of training, you might be wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's so much trash out there.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the point now where you can genuinely just procedurally generate it, which is hilarious to me. Felix, I just emailed it to you for made-up solutions.
You can. That's great. So I can repost it. So the idea, like, if you're founding, like, an Instagram company for CQB training, AI based, you can already start to build, like, a law on this. Like, you have an AI analyzing certain vectors and paths that are beneficial. You can like rehearse videos with that AI, and you're building this whole scientific lore of nonsense around something, and you've created
The
your unique
scientific
selling
law of
point.
nonsense. You've just described all of the big training companies with the massive follower accounts. Like that, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
We exposed it on CBNR fucking podcast. It's amazing.
I think the most important takeaway that people can take from this is do your research. Do your research. There's no magic pill. There's no magic. Like, training is simpler than a lot of people think, and it's consistent. It's
And don't look for excuses.
If you haven't
like
shot in like 6 months, maybe go do that. Maybe like all of this stuff is depreciable skills. As Felix said, it's like gym. You know, you got a couple days and then things nosedive. And I find that with myself. You know, if I don't shoot for a month, my performance goes down the toilet. And I shoot more than most people. Less than some, but more than most.
Yeah. You won't be like, if you're training like every 2 weeks, you won't be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like that's not possible. And then there's another factor, like even if you're working out like daily, chances are pretty low that you will be Arnold Schwarzenegger at any point. Because there's still the factor of aptitude.
There's aptitude, there's intensity, there's everything. Like, don't get sucked into the Instagram world where you think that I shoot with plenty of guys that I see them, they shoot really good on Instagram, but they don't shoot that way in real life. So
that's the thing about social media. It is fake in the degree that it's curated. You know, you see what people want you to see, and
exactly.
Like people's best run, you know, the things done in ideal conditions that they can't, you know, recreate. That's what you get. You know, it's the same thing, and you know, not in the shooting world. All you see are the best aspects of someone's life, never the mediocre ones.
Yeah,
and, you know, I'm guilty of that. I think we all are, but at the same time, you have to be honest with yourself.
I mean, like there's always like a drive towards like presenting you in the best light. That's there. That's how humans are. But like, I mean, a bit of more honesty and self-reflection won't hurt most people.
No, I absolutely agree with that. Anyways, guys, we're coming up on just over 2 hours here. I imagine that it's pretty late where Matt is, and it's very late. And God, what time is it in Germany there?
It's 1900 right now.
Really? Oh, yeah. I guess it's not as late as. Gonna get some good coffee and maybe some chili. But before that, I am going to fuck around with the AI and see what ridiculous bullshit we can make it say. Actually,
you can make a whole guide.
I did put in, you know, a couple of funny things just the other day to see what it would give me. One of them was how to escape tracker dogs, just to see what it would do. And it warned me that I probably shouldn't be doing that, and it's probably illegal. So it did not give me that warning with vector-based CQB.
So I'm making a post right now on my stories that says I'm doing a Redneck Live with Fieldcraft Survival, Ronin Tactics, and Project Gecko tonight at 8 p.m. And then at the bottom, I'm putting April Fools.
Yes. God, I tried to get it to write me a Siri guide, but it did the...
Sasha should come up with the Siri guide for you.
That is a fantastic idea, actually. I really like Sasha. He's a good guy. Should all get White Castle again.
Yeah. I mean, like Sasha is like, when it comes to Siri, he's like the subject matter expert in this. If you want to sleep in the woods or whatever with nothing,
that sounds miserable. I'm in. Let's do it. I think that would be good content.
So in terms of like where you can find me, XRAYalpha.com is my website. Instagram, xray.alpha.llc. Like, I'll put out as much shooting information as I can. My main focus is getting guys better at the hard skills. I do tactics training, for agencies and organizations. So reach out to me, contact at xrayalpha.com, Matt at xrayalpha.com. I'll get all those emails. That's where you can find me. And then I'll still be doing my thing, unwaverable, not going to pay attention to any of the bullshit out there. Like, no matter what anyone's doing in the industry, I think I'm still going to be taking it my own way. So I appreciate you having me on, Nathan. This was a good time.
Anytime.
Good talk. It was
We'll
awesome.
do it again. Anyways, guys, before we wrap this up, from each of you, from Felix and then Matt, you should share some dad advice for all our listeners here.
Some dad advice, yeah.
These listeners are your children now, and there's nothing you can do with it, and it's joint custody.
Yeah. My dad advice is pretty short this time. Guys, just be fucking normal.
I like that. Just be fucking normal. Just be fucking normal.
That's impossible on the internet these days.
No, if you're recording on this podcast or listening to this podcast, you're probably not. But don't be weird. Don't be weird in a bad way, I think.
Yeah.
My advice is watch out for snake oil. Things aren't that complicated. It took me a long time, like more than I'd like to admit, to learn how to do the most basic things, like target focused shooting or how to grip a pistol properly. That's the big one. There's a lot of friggin' misinformation out that there. It took me over a decade to get the right information, and it's not that complicated. Look into what you're doing. If it sounds too weird and out there, like, press up with your pinky and fourth finger and, like twist the gun around with your thumbs like it's a tea towel. It's probably wrong. Don't do that. Look into people who do this for a living, not people who sat in a fob once and then, made a training company based around nothing.
You can also ask
CQB.
ChatGPT. So, yeah.
ChatGPT will set you up. It's only the right information all of the time. Anyways, thanks for coming on, guys. We'll do this again. It's good to kind of step back from the schizocasting and have something a little more, I think, important and also down to earth. And a lot of people need to hear it. So, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for the invitation.
No, anytime. Okay, bye.